Hey everyone, this is Nic Romolini, and welcome to the first episode of The Blank Page. This podcast is about creativity and neuroses and the intersection of the two. I plan to focus on screenwriting primarily, and hopefully we'll be able to invite other artists to come and talk about their experience with creativity and neuroses. The Blank Page to me is the ultimate representation of infinite possibility and simultaneous crippling anxiety, and those will be the sort of themes that I plan to explore on this show. The first conversation is with Dan Shurley, a writer and journalist and a dear friend of mine. We recorded this conversation in the middle of August in LA's first major heat wave of 2020. He was finishing up a master's program in Gainesville, Florida at the time of this recording. So he was having his own experience with heat, and of course the COVID pandemic is underlying everything this year. There was a mosquito biting me for the entire 90 minutes that we were recording. So the occasional slap you'll hear is me trying to kill it. I humiliatingly misused the word craven many times, and I've been thinking about it ever since, which is a little bit of a glimpse into my psyche. This episode kind of serves as an introduction to who I am and my ethos, I guess. We discussed academia, we discussed my blue-collar roots, his roots, being Italian-American, neuroses, of course, insecurities, feeling like a fraud. We talked about video stores from the aughts, we discussed masculinity, and we had a bit of a discussion about my history, my 20s. Dan and I spent a lot of time together in my early to mid-20s, which were particularly tumultuous, and we started to explore that a little bit. A plane flew over at the very end, fittingly. There were no planes for the duration of the podcast until the very end, so I guess that's it. Enjoy the show, and thanks for tuning in. Here's my conversation with Dan Shurley.
How goes it?
Well, it's 73 degrees, approaching 100 for today and the next 7 days or something outrageous.
Oh, yeah. That's exciting. We just came off of a week of 100 plus heat index.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. And you have the swampy humidity.
Oh yeah, the slow roast.
Right. Yeah, here it's like you're in an oven in a strange way, because it's dry heat. So
yeah.
But there it's like you're in a sauna in which someone just keeps pouring water on the rocks. There's always that
right.
guy in the sauna.
I think I would prefer the oven because then you could chop up some mushrooms and peppers and onions, sprinkle a little thyme on it from
exactly.
the garden. I don't fuck with saunas.
Yeah, and I always found the steam room to be more palatable because there's something about the wet heat that you can almost breathe better in a way.
Yeah.
Like the dry heat can sort of choke you.
Right, which would explain why so many old people come here to die.
Right.
Because it's comfortable.
Right, it's a comfortable death.
Easy on the lungs.
It is straight. I mean, I guess when they come out here to die, they're coming to usually the coast, I guess. So they have the sort of more humid microclimate out there by the coast, as opposed to central LA or literally the rest of the greater Los Angeles area that just bakes like some sort of desert that it is.
Right. Have you read Nathaniel West yet?
No. The Day of the Locusts?
Yeah. I feel like every LA hipster should have read that just to kind of shit on LA while you're making a go of it.
I don't know. Perhaps I've shied from it because I'm not that interested in the shitting anymore. Maybe I just want to embrace LA in an earnest way. nightmare place that it is.
Yeah. I think I read it when maybe I was in Oakland or San Francisco. He's mostly shitting on like the older generation of aspirants who were like trained in vaudeville acts and were trying to break into the movie biz.
The biggest problem for me about LA is the deep white supremacist roots, obviously. This being the sort of hoped paradise for Midwestern whites.
Right.
It's strangely segregated for such a giant city that has so many different cultures. I don't know. It's alarming, obviously, but it's disheartening, and it's also confusing.
Yeah. We have the same thing here, of course, in the South. I think didn't a lot of Southerners settle in LA? Did I just make that up?
I don't know. We'd have to turn to an LA historian for that.
Yeah, sociology is not my strong suit. What to me, what to me is first thing in the morning.
I mean, it's first thing in the morning for me too. I was like, 8 a.m. will be great. Like, I'll have this call, like, because it's gonna be really hot, and then I'm gonna fucking have to take the kids somewhere to like beat the heat because there's no central air conditioning, and that's my child screaming. Are you out there, Dad?
I just heard one of them.
It's a circus. It's a real fucking circus. But then I was like, I haven't even had my second cup of coffee yet, so hopefully this is coherent.
I'm still working on my first.
Oh, wow. At 11:06 a.m. See, this is the luxury of the mid-30s single or other, I don't know how you childless, I guess is how you describe it, but it's vexing to me. I had a friend the other day text me and be like, I'm really just embracing the do nothing component of this quarantine and really just trying to work on aspects of myself that I've long overlooked. And I'm like, motherfucker, the luxury that you have to do that. And I'm like, of course everybody's reality is their own, and I chose these shackles. I don't really think of them as shackles, but 11 a.m. first cup of coffee, fucking remarkable. How late were you up last night?
I was up until 3 watching an interview with Shane Bauer about the private prison system.
Wow.
And just we always find like a hard-hitting doc to keep us up at night, and then we'll have the what can be done conversation at like 3:30.
Wow.
And then we'll have the I'm not doing my part conversation at 4.
That's when it gets like a little self-loathing and then puts you right to sleep.
Exactly.
That's incredible. So this is like your schedule is like 10, 11 a.m. wake up and then awake until 3, 4 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, like because I drink too much coffee during the day.
Right.
So I'm up late, and then I'm exhausted in the morning, and I'm typically during this time, which I've carved out for myself as reading and writing time. Okay, it's the most selfish thing I do, but it's completely essential to what I'm trying to do as a writer. But often I'm just too exhausted to even make use of this time.
This time in the morning is what you've carved out for reading and writing?
Yeah.
Got it.
And it could be 2 hours. It could be, and if I'm in a writing flow, then I could go into the afternoon, which I now see as a huge luxury. But I've been in this grad school footing for the last couple of years, so that's doable. Now, since I started working again in the real world with a big boy job and money worries creeping into that time, there's not, you have to steel yourself to to actually like accomplish anything. And then I'm still working at 3 p.m. and Leah's like, weren't you supposed to pick up the cats at the vet or like a million other things? If I had children, I mean, I wouldn't even be, I wouldn't be able to sit that long. But it's not even good to sit that long because now I'm like editing shit to death and uh, tr- trying to force something to take shape because I'm feeling a little bit of that heat.
Yeah, that's the strangest thing about this moment in time. I haven't worked, since March, and I I have the kids, so I guess that's sort of a job that I'm doing. But, I can't imagine feeling this sort of drive to create and drive to get like work done and write things, and to also have to juggle like a job. And though I say all that, and in times when I'm like gainfully employed as, an editor, I have more systems in place, and I'm way more mentally organized to get things done, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like, and we've spoken extensively about this. The day job kind of gives you a pivot. I mean, it can really save you from yourself. Um, Not for everyone, but speaking for myself, I don't want to be working full time and struggling against that because then you're hitting up against limited mental resources.
Right.
But yeah, having some kind of job to pivot to, for me, it solves a lot of like anxiety problems. The number one thing I look for in a job is security. Like I don't need to get too excited about about what I'm
Right.
doing because I know I have this other thing that's more important to me
Right.
and rewarding and so forth. But yeah, that pivot can really like, and then you have to organize your time more efficiently when you're not working.
Right. But having the work, I think having to organize yourself to get, I mean, for me, I'll have to go to a post-production office or whatever, but like having to organize my day around that, it kind of switches my mind into a different gear and allows me to be more organized in the rest of my time. I mean, it's only during those times that I'm, daily waking up at 5 a.m. doing, 30 minutes of yoga, 30 minutes of meditation before anybody in the house is awake. It's very rare in a time of sort of drought of that kind of work that I'm doing those things. And though I think that's the goal, right? I mean, if my goal is to be a screenwriter, director, like whatever the thing is that I ultimately want, where I'm not, serving someone else's whims,
Yeah.
I need to create more systems and I need to be more organized. Like I need to create this for myself and get out of my own way. And I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been thinking about that because we were taking personality tests at 4 a.m. last night. Which
I almost spit my coffee out.
which is so what during the interview, Sean Bauer, who went undercover in this private prison in Louisiana, he had to take a personality test in order to get the job, and it turns out that he had some some like moderate authoritarian tendencies and mostly like supportive, empathetic qualities. So we were like, oh, let's take this test. Let's see if we're prison guard material. Uh, and then we just went on like this. I mean, I took like 12 personality tests last night, um, and I I realize that, as these things like often just they'll like tell you that what you want to hear about yourself. But um, when I did notice, like I wanted to answer the questions are like, do you plan everything out? Do you consider all the angles before you make a decision? And I was like, yes, I do. I know
I
that this
definitely
isn't
do that.
true about. I know it's not true about me, but it's becoming. I'm getting more organized and in all aspects of life, and I yes, and I feel like that's essential for like having a creative life where you're kind of the boss. Uh, it's like running a business,
Right.
as cynical as that may sound.
But that's the whole thing about it, right? I mean, I remember when I first sort of realized that this is an entrepreneurial pursuit, a lot of my realities were sort of shattered, I guess, in a weird way. Like my sort of like, well, no, I'm an artist, so I'm not a businessman. I'm not like a craven. Because, I associate entrepreneurship with like craven sort of predatory capitalism, right? And that's
Right.
not the reality. Those two things can exist. You can be an entrepreneur that isn't craven, I guess. But it's strange to think of creativity in that way. But ultimately, it is. I mean, if you want to do it and make money doing it, you have to create a commodity that is going to make somebody else money. Like, that's the bottom line.
I mean, like there's definitely a industry of people who take it the last mile and package it and turn it into a commodity.
Right.
But just in terms of like giving yourself the basis for operations, like cash flow, time management, um, contacts, cultivating relationships, like these are all things that any business person would be doing, maybe like in a consultancy or whatever. Like let's like pick a non-nefarious industry.
Right.
Let's say you're trying to be a commercial illustrator or something. You're still doing the same things, but and then the creative stuff that you pour into it is that's like that's the unknown value. I mean, you could never anticipate that or quantify that, or but yeah, you can create the habits where you can capture that, or or try to get it down and then shape it into something eventually that's like resembling a marketable product. I'm disgusted that these words are coming out of my mouth. Um, I'm 36 years old, and I've been at this for like, you know, I mean, writing for a decade, but
Right.
other thing, music for much longer.
Two
And
decades,
my
probably.
yeah, ever since I came out of the womb,
Right.
so to speak. I mean, but all of that stuff, but there was always this thought like, oh, someone else will do that. Someone else will market this. I'm just like, uh, I'm so overwhelmed and inspired by life and experience. I'm too busy having experiences, too busy, chasing inspiration and madness and magic.
Right. I have to be the Kerouac. Like somebody else can be the one who's pushing me out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I was I was a reluctant. I reluctantly came to realize that I was more of a Ginsberg. I wanted to be on the road and picking grapes in Salinas, but was more suited for the library.
I always thought I was that I had such manic and magnetic energy that I was Dean, but then I realized that I was just Jack and would have definitely drank myself to death. And like just recorded all the magic that was happening around me, but would have been dead ultimately. Not like Dean just settled down with a family by by the time of Big Sur. But
but Neil Cassidy died of exposure. You knew that,
Right.
right?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, he died a worse death than Kerouac. He just like walked off into a field somewhere during a blizzard.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you got to live a certain way till the death, I guess. I have this strange thing too. I mean, and this is something that I just keep working on, I guess. But I definitely have that sort of voice in the back of my mind whenever I fully embrace this stuff. And I don't know if it's coming from a blue collar family, from a blue collar community, or what exactly it is. But I definitely have this sort of, what do you think, you're better than me voice, that's always talking whenever I'm like embracing a real artistic pursuit in earnest, like I just think of people's voices from my past, and I just think of me talking about writing a movie or wanting to make a movie, and I just think of somebody being like, what do you think, you're special? Like, you should be out here digging these ditches with us,
Yeah.
I don't know if you have that, or if you grew up with any of that, but that is definitely something that persists to this day that I have to work on to push through this stuff.
No, I was fortunate that both of my parents, the blue collar thing wasn't central to their identity. My dad is a musician. He wanted to be a music teacher. He fell into a blue class lifestyle. My mom rarely worked and was content to raise children and just kind of have a quiet domestic life. They never pressured me to one way or the other. Um, my grandfather, he probably would have insinuated himself more in my thinking, but he died when I was in my early 20s. And he would always say things like, "Hey Dan, while you're at Temple, why don't you go to the podiatry school?" And I was like, "But Pop, I'm studying sociology."
But there's money in feet, Dan. You know that. There's always going to be money in feet.
And I wasn't even really studying sociology. I was reading like whatever I thought was interesting. I got more from the library, reading French poetry or whatever. But but to get back to your question, like I can't talk to my family or my extended family about what I'm doing. It makes no sense to them.
Right.
Uh, so I just keep that to myself. And then I don't anticipate like getting that validation from them, like, "Oh, you wrote a book, congratulations, you're important." No,
Right.
they'll never give a fuck, and I'm glad because they love me regardless of what I do in the world in terms of like status and accomplishment. The other problem I have though is like with people that are sort of in my boat and the sort of professionalized artist and the career academic. I don't want to become like them. Like we all just finished this program and I hear everyone's like anxious to finish a book. I'm working on my novella. I have to I have to drive to my second home in North Carolina to finish my novella. And I do ask that question of them, what makes you special? And I haven't really figured that. I haven't seen that, or and it doesn't seem like, I mean, a lot of people, like, I totally get the impulse, and we all want to feel special, and we all should feel special to some people, or for something we do well, we want to be recognized for it. But then it's like, maybe it's not so important to to actually get that to to get that external validation, maybe it won't even make a difference. I'm kind of rambling here, but I was just kind of incensed. Like
People's
getting like
self-importance, basically.
yeah, just catching up with like people who were really indoctrinated in this writing program, in the idea that what we're doing is important,
Right.
and we would be nothing without a book. Like
Right.
that's the path we're on, and if um, anything else would be a kind of consolation.
I think about manual labor a lot. I'm not going to lie. I think about working construction jobs, and I think about the satisfaction of accomplishing something in a day's work and then just going home and just being with your family. I think about, generations of people before me, that's what their life was. There was no, I'm going to toil away at this thing that needs to come out of my brain and my soul and my heart and whatever, and until I get there I can't feel peace. They were just like, no, I'm gonna assemble these bricks in a way until something is built out of them, and then I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna eat bread. But I do think of sort of the thoughtlessness of that in a positive way. But yeah, I'm not entitled to tell my story. I'm not entitled to put a story into the world, but I am compelled to do it. I don't think that the world will stop spinning if I don't do it, or that I will have lived a meaningless life. Yeah, that's a strange one. I feel like you have a certain pathology from the grad school thing that I don't necessarily know if I can relate to, because you've been so entrenched in it for the last couple of years. I mean, I'd be disgusted, I'm sure, and couldn't wait to get back to, the exact type of people that I'm describing.
Yeah, no, I would prefer to be among the kind of people you're describing, because like they can look you in the eye, and you can have a real connection, that you could break bread.
Right.
And it doesn't matter where you stand in like this rarefied culture that's all based on reputation and your latest offering, whether it cuts the mustard.
Well, LA is that every moment of every day with everybody you see. It's what can you do for me and what have you done last, basically. I mean, thankfully I live in what's still something of a working class neighborhood, even though it continues to be gentrified by the minute, it feels like, even during 5 months of a pandemic. But yeah, it's the sort of down-to-earth component that is lacking, as everyone tries to look at you as an angle to get to what they want to get to.
Yeah, but there's very few people that can actually get you anywhere.
Right.
That's the thing. That's why it makes no sense to be in a barrel of crabs with people who are just sort of like, more or less at the same level you are.
Right.
It's a barrel of crabs, and I mean, it was really difficult to be here for 3 years, and to just have like your relationships be so tenuous,
right?
Because it's all like, it all comes down to where you stand with the people who matter, so to speak.
Well, right, and then for me, at least, with anxiety, then I think of every single thing that I said to that person that I perceive as mattering, and then I pore over how that person thinks of me, which, is something I do constantly anyway, is just unending concern about what everyone thinks about me. But when it comes to the person who could actually elevate me at least, or so I think. It becomes this neurotic obsession with like not fucking that up. It's just
Right.
it's not a tenable way to live.
Yeah. Well, I guess it comes with the territory.
Right. I could have chosen to dig ditches.
You could have, or you could have been a bricklayer.
I should have been. I get these hands. They're made to just move bricks around, not to hold a pencil.
You could be the first artisanal bricklayer in LA. You could be molding bricks in your backyard.
I've thought about building a brick oven in the backyard to make pizza, and I've looked at plans. But the thing is, as much as I am cut from that cloth, I have none of the actual skills because they died, the generation before me. So like, I should be doing it ostensibly, but I have literally no idea. And I think about my two sons, and I'm like, I mowed lawns for summers when I was, a teenager. Like what? And my dad, owned businesses, so I like worked retail stores and things like that. Like, what are these kids gonna do? What are they even gonna know how to do? And like, I don't know. There's this one part of me that's like, man, they're gonna miss out on knowing what it's like to be on a fucking landscaping crew. And then there's this other part of me that's like, no, they won't be missing out on anything. They'll just be able to fully embrace whatever the thing is that they really are drawn to, Like, I didn't need to work in those warehouses to get anywhere further in my mental makeup. Although although I still find myself feeling most at home in those. Anyway, I don't want to keep dwelling on this idea, but
no, I want to pick it up because you just reminded me of something, like just having had that experience working in warehouses, factories, even restaurant work, where you're just sweating it out.
Yeah.
All that stuff. It wasn't an option. Like that. I mean, that's just what I needed to do to pay the bills for a while. And I think it's good experience. I think it gives us a window into working class lives, and we rarely hear stories about working class people written by working class people,
right,
who have lived it. And I think that alone is kind of sometimes gives me reassurance that what I'm doing is important, and that if I can speak for more than just myself, then I'm good.
But if you don't get what the story that you need to tell out into the world, you got to go to your second home in Carolina and finish your novella because you're speaking for more people than yourself. No, I totally understand what you're saying, though. I'm obviously just breaking balls, but
well, you can't help it.
I do agree. I mean, these are, for me personally, like these stories, these experiences are what shape and influence everything that I do and bring that perspective to everything that I do. It is strange to like straddle that line that I always feel like I'm straddling of like, I'm an Italian American from Philly. Like, my last name is Romolini. Like, what do you think people think when they see me and meet me? And then I'm like, no, but I did really well on my SATs. Don't you understand? And like, I was just literally like watching, the international collection on Criterion. Like, don't box me in as just like some Goomba from, the street. But I always feel that, and I feel like that's how I'm still perceived. Which is strange. Maybe if my last name was Shurley, I wouldn't feel that way.
Well, it's kind of interesting with our generation. I mean, I think a lot of great artists from the last two generations came from immigrant families, and they still had accents, and they still um, had some part in the culture of where they came from. I'm thinking of like Jonas Mekas. I mean, even Andy Warhol came from a poor Czech family in Pittsburgh, and he changed his name a little bit um, to try to maybe try to fit in a little better. But he was, but what am I getting at here? I feel like there's our culture has become so superficial that everyone's starting to talk the same and apply the same varnish and the same Instagram filter. There's
Right.
this homogenization happening.
Right.
So in the past, it felt like it seemed like people could be more from immigrant backgrounds could be more themselves, and I think it's a source of strength to still be rooted and to for that to still be palpable to people. Like people can tell you come from somewhere by the way you talk. I slip into my accent when I talk to my parents, but and I used to feel a need to kind of disguise that more, but I don't feel it as much these days. Maybe it's because I feel a little more established, and and I feel less vulnerable to a kind of class based um, condescension.
Well, it's funny you should say that, right? The way that you would sort of switch your accent or fight your way out of your accent. I mean, because that's what my grandparents did, my great grandparents did. Like, they were forbidden from speaking Italian in the house. Like, they wanted to become American as quickly as they possibly could because they didn't want to be pigeonholed as or pegged as what they were. Um, Obviously, that was for significantly more survival reasons, I guess, than us today. But what you're doing is a version of the same thing by dropping the accent. And, I mean, I've thought about that, especially in LA. Like, most people don't sound like me and don't present the way I am. And that's okay. I will be polarizing to some, and that's fine too. But that instinct to like switch it and speak more eloquently and not whatever the thing is, I can't even do it anymore. I could try to speak without the accent. I can't even really do it anymore because it's been so many years of not trying. But that impulse, I think, is rooted in that same thing that happened when people came to America, like become American as quickly as possible. And I think what you're kind of alluding to is like our generation, me, you, because we're third or fourth generation immigrants now, like we have just been indoctrinated into, this sort of Wonder Bread mayonnaise society. So like there are still immigrant stories that are being told and that are being celebrated, but they're the new wave of immigrants, And though I still culturally hold on to a lot of what being Italian is, and I won't let that go. Try as I may, or try as others may wish me to, perhaps. But I don't know. It gets thinner and thinner, my tether to it, as fewer and fewer people feel it, unless you're entrenched in a strong community of that has remained unchanging. And then, of course, you've run into all these other issues of, I don't know. This is sort of off the rails, and we're just talking about identity at this point. But I think it's important to the work.
I do too. I think of it as a source of all good things that come from the earth and come from just simplicity, uh, survival. I mean, that's where that ultimately, like, when my ancestors came out of Italy, they were completely destitute, but they had a rich culture intact, which they brought over here and tried to keep alive for a couple of generations. I mean, it's certainly died out. Um, if I was entrenched in an Italian American community, say in South Philly, I wouldn't be the person I am. I would probably be a lot more narrow-minded, a lot more politically to the right. Um, and I and if I wasn't, I would have to leave because that community's become entrenched in a bad way. It's not keeping good aspects of the culture alive. It's just keeping the tribal thing going, which now identifies itself as anti-black and anti-people of color, anti-feminist, anti-gay, like all
Anti-immigrant,
these things, anti-everything.
anti-immigrant somehow, which is
Yeah, yeah,
outrageous.
even
Like,
anti-immigrant.
you
They
were
treat
immigrants. It's confounding.
Yeah, one or two generations removed, and they can't see that Mexican Americans are in almost identical circumstances
Exactly.
in that part of the country and throughout the country.
I did leave that. I mean, exactly what you're talking about. Like, I did leave that because as the person who wasn't that, or who straddled that line of like holding that identity, but also sort of seeking more, I had to leave, you know? I mean, because otherwise, if I had stayed there, I would have been the one ostracizing people like me.
Right.
Right? I mean, it gets to a certain point of generations of tribalism. You're absolutely right, where then you start rejecting the other in the same way your people were rejected. And it feels uniquely American. I mean, and obviously the sort of American experiment hasn't been attempted elsewhere. But anyway, what are you working on now?
I'm not really working on anything right now.
That's another luxury of quarantine life. You can just work on nothing if you want.
You could say I am working on nothing because I'm reading John Cage's lectures on nothing and his book Silence. I have my book, my Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind here. I just stopped work on a project that I thought was going to be a novella or a book length work, and it turned out to be 40 pages, 40 really condensed pages, and I'm okay with that. I sought the advice of a poet whose work I respect, and he was like, yeah, keep the 40 pages. If you tried to turn that, I had other stuff like 100 pages. If I tried to turn that into a book, the 60 pages would have felt like filler, make weight. So I just, I think I'm at the point where I can just accept that there's a lot of cruft that needs to be left by the wayside, and I'm gonna move forward. I don't know what I'm moving forward into. It could be music. It could be something entirely different. It's a nice feeling to not have a a project that's like structurally flawed and all consuming, weighing on my mind as it has been the last couple of months. But I'm getting excited, stirrings of possibilities with film and music.
I find that I go in waves of those two things, vacillate back and forth between like a deep interest in one or the other, and then it fuels the other. Like I spent probably 2 months of this quarantine just playing music, writing songs, recording, like obsessing over that process, and then like towards the end of that being like, man, I really need to because, you know, it's this unending burden that I put on myself, but I'm like, man, I should really be writing a movie because I live in LA and I want to sell movies and make movies and whatever. I should really be channeling this energy this creativity that I have into making movies, but like, or writing a movie, but you can't force it. You know, you just kind of have to take, at least I find you have to just take what's coming and just run with it in the moment. And though that can be sort of untenable for your future in some ways, because I'm like, well, I don't know. I always make the joke about like, I'm not going to sell the song about overdosing to California Pizza Kitchen and like live off the royalties. Whereas I could sell the movie and like actually make a living. It's that strange thing of like the figuring out the art mixed with the money is really tough.
Yeah. I mean, I would be asking myself, which is the right form for this content, and not worry about which one could make money. Because if you find the one that if you find the perfect form for the content, it's going to be such a beautiful thing. It's going to be so powerful. It doesn't matter if it makes money, but it will probably people will find it interesting, and it could gain some traction. It's such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah. You know, I have some friends who have just sort of like abandoned the pursuit, at least for now, and gone off and gotten, you know, MBAs and gotten jobs in finance and been like, well, you know, I still do the creative thing, and when I'm ready, I'll make the movie. And I'm like, I don't know, though. Will you?
No, they will not.
They absolutely will not.
I mean, that MBA is sort of like your. I mean, that's a statement that you're making to yourself,
right,
and to the world.
Right.
We make these statements in various ways. Some people get a face tattoo. Some people resist a full-time job, and you know.
I think about that too, though. Like, if my whole identity, if you Google me and like my whole identity online is like, I'm an editor, I fucking cut this great marketing piece that helped sell the $1 billion box office Avengers movie, like, how do I shift that, and how do I get people to take me seriously as a filmmaker, as a writer? Like, and does that matter? I mean, it's not a face tattoo, it's not an MBA, you know, Nic Romolini MBA on my LinkedIn, but like, even within the field that I want to ostensibly be working in, I feel already like I'm sort of viewed in a certain way. Can that guy write? Can that guy act? Can that guy direct? Because all I've seen are the things that he's edited.
I mean, it doesn't really matter what Google thinks. It really just matters what maybe one or two or three people who could give you the green light would think.
That guy who I hope I didn't fucking say the wrong thing in front of.
Essentially, yes.
So maybe the person escaping to Carolina to finish that novella does fucking know what they're doing. I don't know.
I think I was trying to say, like, you make your short film and put it on Vimeo, and if one person likes it, and if that one person believes in you and has the resources to bring you to a wider audience, that's all you need. But the rest, be it Google or the analog version, which would be like standing in the center of the room at an art opening and name dropping, like that's all smoke and mirrors that everyone's doing at a certain level, and it doesn't mean shit.
So ultimately, you're telling me to stop worrying about what people think about me.
Yeah.
You think that'll set me free?
I'm telling myself that.
I know. 36 years. 36 fucking years I've had to live with this. It would be really nice to just be set free from that obsessive negativity. But I'm working with Scott on it, once a week, once a week for an hour.
Yeah. Every therapist is named Scott.
It's the best therapist name. I mean, it's a fuck it. What else could he do? Had to be a therapist. Yeah. So so now you'll seamlessly. You'll leave a project by the side of the road, and you will read about nothing, literally, for a while, and ground yourself, and then the next thing will just emerge.
I hope so. I mean, to get back to what you were saying about like how do you become known as the guy who makes films as opposed to the guy who edits films. There's a freedom in not being known in a particular field where you can just kind of try all kinds of things. Nobody knows that I spent years trying to make music in various ill-starred outfits populated by like bipolar friends and foes. But and for a time I considered myself a failure. Like, oh, I failed at music, and so I'll try writing now. But the longer I'm on this planet, the more I realize there could be a cycle coming around the bend where I just pour myself into music and just totally shed this, or temporarily put aside this identity as a writer, and just pour myself into music. And it could just be really simple phrases on a nylon string guitar. And when I find the right images to accompany that could be something. I don't know what it could be, but I just have like these stirrings of new things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing now. Sometimes I use it as a way to distract myself from a really difficult project that I'm struggling with. Other times it's just like, well, maybe the time is right for this. Maybe I need to express something in this way.
I can relate. I totally can relate. And I'm currently making a podcast to distract from the movie that I started writing last week. But I don't think of it as necessarily a distraction. I mean, a part of me is like, okay, then now this is going to be more work and more time dedicated to this. But I'm also like, now I'm going to hold myself accountable to a degree. I have these conversations all the time. And, there will be a certain amount of catharsis that comes out of it, and really a certain amount of accountability. Like, I wrote 4 pages the other night. I have no idea what this movie's going to be yet, but I started it. I wrote the first scene. So, I mean, it's not page 1, but it's somewhere in there. And now I'm talking to you about it. So now it's making it more real, I guess.
What's it about? That's the worst question I know.
What's it about?
Anyway. What's it about? It's about my feelings. You would never understand.
But the world needs it. But the world will relate because they're universal. But you wouldn't get it. It's and this is sort of what makes this so difficult to like look this all in the face. Is like, it's autobiographical, as sure. Is most of what I do. And like, sure. I've mentioned this to you before, like coming from here we go again, coming from like a blue collar, really it's being Italian. Like, you don't talk about yourself. You certainly don't tell strangers about yourself. You don't talk about your mother to strangers or your siblings to strangers. Are you kidding me? That's like the most animal thing you could do. I mean, it's like breaking this code. Mafia tropes or not, like there still is, in my experience, like Italians, they don't say any. You don't say anything about anything. Nobody's supposed to know anything about what happens inside the family. And like all of my shit is so like visceral, like just like look at my raw flesh, you know? And it flies in the face of what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. And then also talking to you about the process feels like it's something I shouldn't be doing either.
Are you writing about your family directly?
100%.
Oh, okay.
I mean, names are changed, you know, but it's memoirish, I guess. And that's the thing. I kind of don't really know what part of the biography is the movie I want to make right now. But I know there are movies in there, you know. I know that the reason I absconded to Kansas City after living on the floor of your basement for 2 weeks is probably related to something that happened when I was 5 through 10. And I think I could probably try to draw that parallel and tease that out in a screenplay.
Oh, and it could be a road trip too.
Right, there could be a road trip. There could be a road trip. Or more saliently, it could be me smoking a cigarette in the bathroom of that Southwest airline flight, during which like the flight attendant clearly knew what was happening and just kind of let me do it. The federal offense that I committed and thankfully wasn't caught doing.
I do want to know about this period in your life.
Which one? The Kansas City one?
I've sort of mythologized in my own mind.
But you lived part of it with me, sort of.
Yes, but I didn't know what you were experiencing when you absconded to Kansas City and what that was like getting settled in there and
Maron.
And I know you were on a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
Yeah. Leading up to that, and then all during that, and then for the 10 years since that. No, but for a long time after that. And that's where it gets tricky for me. Like, how do I drill down? Like, what is the most... Maybe that's the movie. Maybe the movie starts with... me on a plane or something. I don't know. And maybe it's told in flashback. I don't know. But yeah, the 6 months that I spent in Kansas City were fucking harrowing, as were most of my 20s. And I don't know. I think that's when it can get really hard for me to drill down to like, what is the story that I actually want to tell right now? And then of course there's the voice that's like, why do you think your story needs to be told? Why? But I'm like, well, because I can fucking see it in a movie. I know that if I saw these things in a movie that I would be fully locked in and I would be fully engaged with the content. Like I almost burned down my sister's house because I made like a fucking... remember how I used to light fires in coffee cans indoors?
Vaguely.
We used to do it in the backyard of the 515, but I would also do it in basements and shit for warmth. No, it was insane. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into it now, but but I had this thought the other night. You know, I was talking to my wife and just processing some, feelings, trauma from my youth, and I was like, I just don't exactly know like what the movie is and what story I want to tell. And she was like, well, why don't you just write one scene? Like, don't think about what it's going to be in the bigger picture. Just sit down and write a scene and then write another scene and just see where it takes you. And I thought that was like, I don't know, it may seem pedantic to some, but I thought that was really helpful advice, to just write the thing that's in your brain and not really worry about how it fits into the bigger picture of the bigger thing until later.
Yeah, totally. That's the modern thing. I was just reading John Cage on Eric Satie, and he writes about how Satie just totally dispensed with transitions between parts of his music, which no one was really doing. in the 19th century. And he was sort of like even ahead of what people were doing in writing. And then that became the modern thing with Pound and avant-garde poetry, just dispensing with transitions. Um, and the mainstream has sort of caught up with that. Like, I mean, I even see that in TV editing, like really quick cuts. You sort of have to recreate parts of the narrative. It's a great way to work too, to just have these like glowing scenes and not have to worry about doing all of this
Like
tedious
creating all the
labor
sinew that connects
to
everything.
get them connected. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
When
crazy. It gives give the audience some credit too. I feel like, like I think that in not. Sorry, I'll let you finish what you were saying.
No, I think I was just like in lecturing mode because
You referenced Cage, Sati, Pound. I was just waiting for more to come.
I'm waiting for an audience of 19 to 23-year-olds to assemble.
Perhaps they will. Perhaps they will. In television editing and in film editing, I think, and in storytelling in general, you need to give your audience some credit that they're going to understand it. And frankly, I feel like you need to be okay with people not understanding some things.
Yeah.
If they're not crucial elements, I feel like that's what creating like a multi-layered thing is all about, right? I mean, there's deeper meanings, and though the surface meaning is enough.
Yeah.
That was like fucking film school 102.
But I wanted to ask you, and I think at this point we might just be workshopping your screenplay.
Sure.
But see, when I picture you from that time period, and I know you don't have to be writing your life story. Like you could be fictionalizing and doing whatever. So feel free to like disregard all this. But when I went out there to Kansas City to see how you were living, and you picked me up at the airport, whiskey drunk.
Was I drunk when I picked you up?
I think your shirt open to the gills.
To the belly button.
To the belly button. Yeah, you were drunk.
Fuck.
You had a Jack Nicholson kind of persona going on. Like 1970s 7 Easy Pieces style. I don't know if you remember that flick.
Isn't it 5 Easy Pieces?
Like, was it 5 Easy Pieces? Yeah. Like that new Hollywood thing.
Right.
I feel like if you did write the story of that time, it would be interesting to write it as just a kid who wants to make movies and is playing out like a couple different tropes.
Right.
And he also has his real life and like whatever he's dealing with. But yeah, it's just like
he's living personas so that he could then write them later.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That could be really cool. And then you'd have this opportunity to do a kind of pastiche of different styles.
Right.
But I've already said too much. I fucking hate workshopping.
Well, because now
people have ideas, and it's really like the film they want to make.
Of course. And for me to hear all that, now I'm like, well, I didn't have that fucking idea, so now I can't use that idea because now it's his idea, and people will fucking think I'm a fraud for not being able to come up with the ideas on my own. And I think maybe that's just a function of never really being involved in like workshopping or brainstorming and always being like, I need to fucking do all this myself in a dark basement. But yeah, that is interesting. That's a cool idea for a movie. Maybe mine, maybe not mine. But yeah, that you came to Kansas City like only a couple weeks after I was there too, I think. Cuz I moved in the middle of February and I think you came in March. I mean, granted it was only a 6-month tour, but like a lot of shit happened after you. Like you were just seeing the early on part. Like I got
Yeah.
sober, I guess, after you came. I think you even came out within 2 weeks of me moving there.
Yeah, I missed you. I think
Yeah.
I might. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that. Yeah, I thought you had been like sort of settled out there.
No,
But
because we were
I guess the passage of time is different when you're that young and stupid.
totally, totally. Well, and we were living like this lifestyle at the time, like, or at least in my mind. I mean, it felt Kerouacian, except that I just stayed in Philly, and like you, it feels like you did shit. Like your trip to L.A. that like involved Mexico and whatever like that. I mean, I feel like there are little movies, at least scenes from movies, in a lot of what we lived together as well.
Yeah, I mean it. I think I was probably trying to live out some beat fantasy, and the beats did have that Midwestern stopover, didn't they? Weren't they? Were they in Kansas City? I know they were in Denver a lot.
It might have been. I know Denver for sure, but it might have been. There might have been some Kansas City action happening. Um, yeah, and when I was out there too, I remember. Sorry, I just had a thought. When I was out there, like I wanted to get involved. I was like, shit, man, I could fucking buy like a farm out here for probably like a couple grand and like make westerns. Like I had the craziest fucking ideas. Meanwhile, like I was, drunk driving a pickup truck that didn't require a key to start. You just turned the ignition with your hand. And like, God forbid you ever locked the door. You weren't getting in. There was no key to it. But I was like, yeah, I'll just fucking build a studio and make movies. And like I was, driving drunk to fucking MCI, I think is the airport, at like 9 a.m. to pick you up, offering you whiskey like right when you got into the truck.
Were you slinging insurance door to door
The
during
thing
that time?
about the thing about the insurance salesman component of that period of my life is that I never sold a single policy. But I went out with like these two dudes like who, were training me or whatever, and we would just like hang. It just felt like I was hanging out with dudes, and then they would like sell the insurance, and they would be like, and here's how you do it. And they'd be like, now you go do it on your own. And then I just never did it and got a job at a coffee shop. But I will never forget those two guys that like I hung out with, because I feel like that is what most of my life has been, is just like gathering fucking material to tell a story.
Yeah, you should write about those people.
One of the guys was like, he was from like Branson, Missouri, and he was like a singer in addition to being an insurance salesman. Like he was in like some sort of fucking like honky tonk like crooner thing. I can't even remember. I wish I had journaled that era a little better, because so much is lost to the vanishing of time.
Yeah. Oh wow. That gap after you said vanishing of time. I thought you got disconnected there, but that was a nice bit of a nice effect.
It was accidental. I actually just didn't know what to say next, but let's call it profound instead. Or maybe it's not that I didn't know what to say next. Maybe I'm always thinking that something needs to be said to fill the space, and I'm not good at just letting the space exist. Fucking neuroses, man.
Yes. But I would the insurance gig reminded me of a film I saw, American Honey, made by a British filmmaker, I believe, who followed this crew of door-to-door salespeople, and they were mostly teenagers, and they lived out of hotels all around the Midwest. They were kind of scammy.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what they were selling. Shia LaBeouf acted in it. I don't know how you feel about him, but he was very good playing a sort of like pseudo confidence man. And there's a young teenage girl who's very charismatic as well in a quieter way, and they have like this little romance. But the filmmaker really embeds herself with this crew, and they're all real people aside from Shia LaBeouf. Um, the the girl protagonist she met on a beach, I think in Florida, and just asked her if she wanted to be in this film. It's amazing for that the authentic feel that she captures.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I will seek it out. I'm sure it's available on one of the streaming platforms I pay for, except that it's probably not, and it'll be like $2.99 rental, and I'll be like, I pay hundreds of dollars every month for this fucking streaming shit, and I still have to pay more to rent the shit that I want to see. Come on.
All of the good films are, it seems, are like $2.99, and then like I think they just want you to like scroll for 3 hours and get disgusted.
Just settle on something or turn it off.
Thing. I miss the video store though.
I know.
I feel like such an old person saying this. I just liked browsing because you'd have to like actually get up and get dressed.
Right.
To do a little browsing, and you'd also like you'd encounter people in the store who were like on the same wavelength, just kind of like having a schlubby day.
Right.
And it was cool. There was like a camaraderie, a schlubby camaraderie. and you both orbit around like the Fellini section.
What was
the
that?
Auteur section.
TLA?
Was that the TLA?
TLA, yeah.
Center City.
Oh man.
And then if you're feeling really furtive, there's the porn section. I never got that low at that point in my life, but
nor
yeah,
bold.
there was that. Nor bold, yes.
Yeah, there's something about it that the camaraderie and schlubbiness, I think, has just been replaced by the internet. Now everyone is a schlub in a fucking chat room or something. I don't know, but it's nice to see a human tangibly. Maybe it's the human connection you're missing.
Yeah, there was also like the clerk who you presumed knew something about cinema, and you could have a chat or not. They could just quietly judge you.
Right, because you're always feeling quietly judged.
Yes. That could, I don't know what could replace that. How could we replace that on Netflix?
It would be some sort of like join a random other person who's browsing Netflix, and then it would be some digital recreation, virtual reality that doesn't actually really approximate the real thing very well, and leaves you even feeling even more hollow than you did before you had that idea.
But we need that.
Dreadful.
We so need that. It's like our digital experiences are so like containerized.
Yeah.
To borrow a phrase from computer networking.
Containerized.
They're just sort of like the human element has been cut out of it and replaced with creepy copywriting. Like, oh, we're gonna miss you, Dan. Like,
oh yeah, I know.
Like, oh, who are you, by the way, and where were you like this whole time?
Everything's a bot.
You were spying on me.
Exactly.
On everything I watched and and how long I watched it.
To sell me something else.
Yeah. And like there's people when you go out to see a film, which I haven't done in many, many months.
Clearly.
You go with a bunch of people, and it's an anonymous social experience, but we didn't realize how important that was until it was cut out in the name of efficiency and profits for, these what are essentially technology companies.
People don't even realize it though, and people embrace it. A friend was like, "You still go out to the movies?" Well, yeah. What, you don't? No, why would I go out to the movies? I have everything I could ever want to watch at home on my screen. Meanwhile, that same person is like all consumed by like fucking cable news or something else. Like, it's like as long as you're glued to your couch, you're gonna I'm having a hard time articulating what I'm trying to say, but like when you take away that human element and that human interaction, you become so much more susceptible to all the other nefarious underpinnings of techno-capitalism.
Yeah, well said. The conspiracy theories.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's just like we need more reality checks throughout the day.
Right.
Because we live in a media landscape that's more and more consolidated to the point where you know, this is, I mean, well documented stuff, the echo chamber
Of
and
course.
whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's particularly illuminated, obviously, during the pandemic too, the sort of importance of it. I don't want this to be the new reality. I attended a meeting the other night virtually in a Zoom meeting, and it's a screen full of boxes with people's faces, and it feels like the future, and it's great that we can connect in this way. These tools are really great that we've achieved as human beings, I guess. And though it's unnerving and unsettling and actually surreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like it, man. I guess what I'm saying is I don't fucking like it. I want to see people in person, and I think less and less people are aware that they want to see people in person.
Yeah, I guess some people are satisfied with the substitutes, but I think they're probably the same people who
Stop
never
going to
really
the theater.
Yeah, and never really had much of a desire to get out of the coffin
Right.
and see what else is going on, like outside of their immediate environment. So, but I think I'm glad this technology is here because I don't know how else I'd be surviving during the pandemic.
Right.
At the same time, I feel like it's a grand experiment in how isolated we can be as a semi-functioning society. I wouldn't say we're a functioning society right now, but it's a test. It's like, can we colonize Mars? Can we colonize the moon?
Right.
If Earth becomes untenable, because we have this technology that would allow us to remain social animals under totally isolated conditions.
Physically.
Can we do it?
Yeah.
And that's what we're sort of like experimenting on right now. And it is really unsettling to think about the long-term implications and ramifications of this.
Of course. I mean, we can do it. Why wouldn't we do it? Why won't everybody work from home? I mean, we are completely off the rails of what I intended to talk about, and that's totally fine. But like, so I wrote a pilot, and someone was like, well, you got to get some COVID shit in there. You got to get some, isolation shit in there and some masks and stuff. And I was like, why though? I don't, that's not part of the story. But like, now that we're living it, I mean, we will just be pushing farther and farther into it. That's actually not related to what you were saying at all. But yeah, I mean, if we could all just live in little bubbles like fucking Wall-E, which I never would have watched, but I have a 5-year-old, they will keep trying to get us to do that. Why would the office building ever return? Why would a physical workspace ever return if we could just fucking... Did you see that I don't know if it's the most recent Terry Gilliam movie, but it's a Terry Gilliam movie with Christoph Waltz. The name of it's escaping me right now.
Brazil?
No. Christoph Waltz, I don't think, was a real professional actor when Brazil came out. Or maybe he was, but he certainly wasn't known. What the fuck is the name of this movie? The Zero Theorem, it's called. And it's obviously a dystopian near future, but everybody works in these like little pods, and they're near each other, but they're completely isolated from each other. And yeah, I mean, we're just fast approaching as maximum physical isolation, or at least we're trying it out.
I mean, if it proves to be more efficient economically, there's absolutely no reason why corporate America wouldn't embrace it.
I know.
But if it turns out that workers can't be supervised in more sort of like intensely supervised workplaces, then they'll have them come in person. Or if in some industries, it helps to have that face-to-face constant back and forth. So they'll resume the I don't think the office is going to be a thing of the past.
I mean, it certainly will be for the next year.
That's for sure.
The next 12 months. I think some of the tech companies are like, yeah, you could work from home. I think Twitter was like, you could work from home forever.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, you never have to come back to the office type of thing. Well, I mean, why wouldn't they? Their bottom line becomes a lot lower, higher. I don't know what bottom line is. I only went to business school for 6 months before I dropped out. What?
When did you go to business school?
Dude, fresh out of high school, I went to Penn State for a year.
Oh, yeah.
I studied business for a year. This is going to sound like the action of a crazy person, but I pulled out my senior year yearbook the other day because I was trying to recall, like, what the fuck was I like? I know I was a maniac in high school, and I know I was fucking off a lot in high school. But what are some of these stories that I can't remember? Anyway, I pulled out a yearbook, and it's like some of the messages are like, they'll end with like, I look forward to the day that you're a CEO of the company you want to run, and you know, whatever. And somebody else was like, it's going to be great when we run fucking Wall Street or some crazy shit. Like there's such a dissociation between whatever it was that, I mean, whatever, obviously I was 17, but it's fucking strange that like my sliding doors would have been like a McMansion in Hoboken or some shit.
Was that like a character you were trying on at that age?
I didn't even know what trying on characters at that age was. I think it was just, because I was like an arts kid for part of my earlier youth, and then when I got back into the public school system, I was young. I'd skipped a grade, so I was younger than everybody, and I was real fucking anxious, and I needed to fit in, and I needed to definitely not feel like I was more alienated than I already felt by being younger than everybody. And I stopped like theater and stuff like that and embraced like, sports. And I'd always played sports alongside the creative arts, but I like, tried to hang out with jocks, even though I wasn't like fucking. But then I like hung out with like the smart jocks, and then it just seemed like business was the thing. I don't know. At one point, I wanted to like do political science. I was like, I would be a really fucking good lawyer, or politician. Like, I don't know if I wanted to ever be a politician, but I was like, I could be a good lawyer because I know that I could argue a case. And I think that it might have come from cinematic depictions of lawyers, so maybe what I always wanted to be was an actor. But then this one family friend for whom I had a lot of respect was like, no, Nicky, you don't want to go into political science. You got to do something practical. Go to business school. Go get an MBA. Go to Wharton and get your MBA in 5 years. Of course, I didn't get into Penn because I fucked off and smoked weed and drank my entire senior year, but I did get into Penn State as a business undergrad. Yeah, I just had no idea about anything. And I guess I still don't. but it's definitely 20 years of ambling.
Yeah.
But yeah, business
It's
school, man. I could be living in Hoboken right now instead of toiling over what may or may not be a worthwhile screenplay or song or poem. I'm writing poetry. What the fuck am I doing? I'm writing poetry. Like,
oh, cool.
how self-important is that?
Oh, that's great.
I'm just trying to, Scott, Scott was like, just make sure that you're not like feeling like the creativity can only come out in one way. Cause, I was really focused on the music for a while. And he was like, do other things, sketch, write, prose, like whatever. Just don't box yourself into like, well, I got to make this album. I got to record this album because then I'll have an album and I'll sell, whatever it is. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to pursue the arts in earnest.
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for the person who feels a kind of who starts off on a sort of normal trajectory and then just eventually, I mean, is riven with conflict, drops out, joins up with the hippies or the refuseniks or whoever at the time is really just like, no, we don't want to do that. I mean, we're gonna get drunk and try to paint or whatever. I had some friends who were sort of on that same trajectory. I had a friend whose father really pressured him to play football, and he did. Pressured his sons to join the military, and some of them did.
Wow.
And he actually went to art school, and that must have come as a shock to his father. This is a person who turned me on to David Lynch's Eraserhead
Oh wow.
when I was like 18, and I had no point of reference. I thought it was like totally batshit. So this guy was like playing at being a jock, playing at normalcy, but he was really interesting and kind of disturbed. I don't think he would mind me saying that.
You don't
And
think
so
he
you
would
kind
mind
of-
you saying that, you said?
I don't think he would mind me saying that.
Right. He probably embraces the deranged qualities of himself.
Yeah, but just someone having, I understand and sympathize with like having that dual identity. Like you want to impress your people who are more conservative or pragmatic, but you're not really gonna do that in earnest, and you're eventually gonna either flame out or drop out of the rat race and figure something else out.
Yeah, I think for me, I strived for so long to be normal. Like I had this obsession with like what is normal, which is so fucked up and like something that I can correct for the next generation. But yeah, I was like, well, it's normal to do that. These are the normal things. These are the, I mean, I think it was just a real fear of getting beat up, man. I just didn't want to get my ass kicked.
Yeah, I guess that was a real thing at that age.
Yeah, I mean, bullying, I feel like is still a real reality, but it was definitely like physical. Like you will just get beat up. You will, someone will just punch you. There was always a threat of physical harm, which I was trying to. My dad was like this tough guy, and I couldn't fight. So I was like, well, if I just surround myself with protectors, then I'll never get.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I didn't have to be the aggressor myself because I was surrounded by maniacs
Right.
who I was kind of friends with.
Right.
Anyway.
But I was a shit talker, though. I was a shit stirrer. Like, I would stir the pot, and then, like, when it came to it, like, I would always try to make sure I got out before I had to scrap. Like, I would talk shit, and I would, like, irritate and annoy and heckle.
Yeah.
We grew up a different way than the next generation will grow up, or maybe not. Maybe it's just our. I don't know. I'm sure there are people who are still growing up the same way, that they feel like they need to surround themselves with maniacs to not get beat up. But
well, it was definitely like the toxic masculinity was swirling through my circle of friends, and we just thought that was a good way to solve your problems or settle your differences.
Yeah,
definitely.
I've only been in like one fight in my life, and I had to get really drunk, and I didn't even throw a punch because I got on top of the person, and I just felt so bad. I was like, I can't punch this person. I'm not even that angry. Also, I don't want to hurt him. I'm so fucking soft. I've always been soft.
Yeah, I've never been able to punch someone in the face. I have dreams where I'm like, where I keep missing and my arm keeps like drawing itself back.
My arm locks up.
My brother.
I can never actually throw the punch. I mean, and I wonder, my oldest sister, there's this like story, this legendary story of my oldest sister being bullied every day, day after day. This girl would like steal her lunchbox or some shit. She would do something. And my dad, as legend has it, was like, you know what you're going to do? Next time she does it, you're going to square up and you're going to punch her in the face as hard as you can. And the next day, on the way to school, when this girl was bullying my sister squared up and punched this girl in the face as hard as she could. And the girl never bullied her again. And I never had that moment. And I wonder how that's affected me. Like that moment of like standing up for yourself in earnest in that way, I feel like is life defining. And I never did that. I always cowered away.
Well, you can stand up for yourself in many ways, not just physically.
I know. The pen is mightier than the sword.
But you'll have to talk to Scott about that.
And I will. I'll let you know how my next conversation with him goes. Thank you for chatting with me. It's fun as always.
Yeah, likewise. And it's nice to have a kind of formality to it. Then we can, because sometimes you have to ask follow-up questions like, really? You went to business school? So forth.
Totally. All right, man. Well, enjoy your waning days in Florida.
Yeah, I'm not going to miss this place.
Enjoy those perennial tomatoes while you can.
All right, take care.
All right, amigo.
See ya.
Peace.